The basic pummeling position to start off with when you learn is basically under and over. I have an underhook on one side, my opponent has an overhook on the other side. If I have an underhook on one side, I have an overhook on the other side, and my opponent has an underhook on the other side. So I have an underhook on one side and an overhook on the other side. Conversely, Colby has an underhook on my overhook side and an overhook on my underhook side. The basic position here, and we're going to be increasing the precision with how we do this, but the basic goal is going to be for us to both simultaneously try to get underhooks on the side that we have overhooks. So Colby has an overhook on this side. He's going to dig in slowly, and I'm going to dig in simultaneously on the other side so that we've just switched. A moment ago, his left arm was overhook, and my right arm here was underhook. We just changed that. Conversely, a moment ago, my left arm here was the overhook, and Colby's right arm was the underhook, but now we're in the opposite situation. So, I'm going to switch again, and again. And this is the basic type of thing I want to get across. Now, we're not talking about footwork or economy of movement. Don't care about that right now. It's this notion. It's simultaneously, as he's digging in, I'm digging in, we make contact. As he's digging in, I'm digging in, we make contact. Again, not worried about technique or anything like that, or footwork or position so much at this point. Just this basic notion. This is the first thing you've got to get across to yourself so that it feels comfortable like a dance, going back and forth, and just so you have some sensitivity to when he's pushing in, I'm pushing in. To when he's pushing in, I'm pushing in. You know, not worried about anything but this basic thing here right now. Not worried about footwork or how we're positioning our body, keeping our movement economical. Don't care about that right now. Just back and forth. And that's all we want you to do at first is just get that. Just get this pattern down. Back and forth, back and forth. Okay, now, with just that very basic, rudimentary, and not particularly technical structure, we're going to build upon that and increasingly make it more precise. First, keep your head up as you're doing this. As I'm pummeling, if my head comes down, Colby's going to snap me down. So as I'm pummeling, I want to keep my neck bowed. I want to keep my head up from this position, okay? If I bring my head down as I'm digging in, I'm going to get it snapped down. So it's crucial as I'm pummeling, my head is upright. If I'm pummeling and my head starts drifting down, it's going to get snapped down. Next, foot movement. Once you get this pattern down to where you can get a rhythm going with your partner, I want you to think about your foot movement. Basically, the side that I'm digging in on with my underhook is the side that should be slightly forward, okay, with my footwork. So that if I'm digging with my right hand under Colby's underhook here, I'm going to transition to have this foot forward. Likewise, as I switch to the other side, my other foot comes forward. And it's just kind of, it's a little dance. I just keep a little bit of footwork up here from this position here. Back and forth. Next, when you start out doing this, practice with your elbows directly at your side, making it easy for you and your opponent to go back and forth. Notice, if Colby's elbows are directly to his side, for me to dig in, it's just kind of weaseling in here to get some space. And that makes it easy for both of us as we're getting this rhythm down. However, when you're wrestling, you don't want to make it easy. Okay? You want to make it more difficult for your partner or your opponent to be able to get that underhook in. So what I want you to think about doing is, instead of keeping your elbow perfectly lateral to your side, to where there can be a gap, or a gap can be made just by shoving the hand in, I want you to keep it slightly in front. Not too far, but just slightly. Therefore, when my partner or opponent digs in, he doesn't have a straight shot. When he digs in straight here, he actually catches a piece of my rib. And if I jam my elbow in here as I'm digging in, fighting his underhook, trying to get the underhook on this side with my hand, it makes it difficult for him to penetrate and to get in. So that's crucial. When you're practicing it initially, though, practice it easy with each other. Your elbow's out here, but when I'm actually pummeling, my arms are a little bit more forward. Not a lot, just a little bit. Enough such that this gap here does not exist, because to come through, you've got to come straight through, you got to curve around, and then go back. And that makes it much more difficult. So when we're pummeling here, notice I'm not going to leave my elbow out here. Wow, that's really easy for him to slide in. Okay? If I just leave my elbow up, not even close to my body, he's got a huge gap. If I keep it in here, that's a little better. Makes it more difficult. He's got to fight. But if I keep it slightly in front, that makes it much more difficult for him to penetrate. Watch now as we both make it a little bit more difficult. And as you get better at this, notice as he's digging in, look at where my elbow is here. It's in front. It's not here to where he can poke through very easily. It was in front. So he's really got to push, and it's more difficult for him in that situation. And as you get better at this, this will help you learn to be able to fight better in this position. And right now, we're not making it impossible for each other as we're practicing it. The first step is to get the rhythm down. The second step is to get a little footwork down, of course, keeping your head up. The next step to think about is keeping your elbows in a little bit as you're doing it. You're not going to refuse to let your opponent or partner in. This is still kind of a dance. You're trying to develop a sensitivity and feeling for this. So it's just about, maybe about 60 or 70% resistance so that you both have to work. But you're allowing each other in. But I'm becoming very sensitive to where my elbows are so that in a real situation, I'm going to make it very difficult for my opponent to come in with his hands. Okay? So we're going to keep our elbows in as we advance now. Now, the next consideration, as I'm digging in, I don't want my trajectory to be going down, because one of my opponent's goals is going to be to come around my arm and grab my body from here. Naturally, if I'm digging down, this elbow is closer to my body and more susceptible to getting collapsed. Also, too, if my trajectory is down, I'm not putting much emphasis or energy upward on my opponent's arm to prevent him from collapsing my arm. Again, one of his goals is to collapse my arm and come right around my body. So, when I'm digging, I want to dig not in a downward motion, but I'm going to dig through. I'm going to tend to dig up, and you'll notice here I'm going to tend to dig with my pinky up. That puts some stress on your deltoid, and you need to get in a certain amount of physical shape to be able to do this without getting fatigued real rapidly. But my notion here is, as I'm digging up, I'm going to be putting pressure on my opponent's arm this way and this way as I dig in. That's going to give me better control and also make it much more difficult for my opponent to come down on my arms and lock around my body. So as I'm digging in, I want you to notice here, I'm going to come through and I'm turning my pinky up. And it's just a little bit. I don't want to exaggerate it too much. The point being, if I tend to just dig down here, I'm going to get beat in all likelihood. So I want to control him by digging through. Same thing on the other side. Notice if I do this, his arm comes up, claps my arm down. That's more difficult in this situation. I have time to be able to defend. Okay? So as I'm digging in, my goal is to be lifting this arm up. To be lifting the arm up as I come through this way. As opposed to digging down where he's going to attack. So as I'm digging, I'm using some strength here on my deltoids. My pinky is somewhat up. And as I come in, I'm kind of lifting up on his arm here and up on his body. So I'm digging in and up, in and up, in and up as I'm coming through. I'm exaggerating this a little bit here. But the point being is I'm not coming straight through like this. I'm going to lift his arm up. Once more. So I'm digging through. Like this. And by doing that, it's going to make it more difficult for him to come around my body and collapse my arm, like to prepare for a body lock. Now, so I'm pushing in, and as I push in, my pinky is coming up a bit, just a bit too. I'm exaggerating it perhaps for effect, but when I'm actually doing it, it's just coming up a bit. And the notion is here is my arm is going to be lifting up on my opponent's arm. Now, that being said, when I start off, you'll notice I'm digging here. So of course, thumb up, pinky down here. And then as I'm coming through, that's when I tend to transition. If you start with your pinky up and you're trying to dig it through, you'll get caught here. It's very difficult to come through. So if I start from up here and he keeps this arm down, this is the pinky up here, thumb down, I get stuck, I can't jam it through. But remember, to prevent him from coming in, I start out my attack, my pummel in, okay, thumb up, pinky down, remember, by keeping my elbow slightly in front, not to the side, slightly in front. And then as I'm digging in, that's when I start pushing up and rotating my hand a bit, which also rotates my arm up, and it gives me pressure and power to lift my opponent's arm up. Now, once you've got the basic mechanics down, at that point you need to add some movement to it. There's a couple different ways you want to think about moving. Typically I want to be driving into my opponent, I want to be able to get position, and I'm going to be aggressive and offensive. I'm going to be moving in. There are going to be times when my opponent may have better position than me, and I may have to retreat slightly, okay? Or I may be pushing in and retreating slightly to set something up so I can go forward or backward. The other directions I want to go in is either right or left, kind of circularly. So this is not a static thing where if this is the point between us, we're going to stand here rigidly like robots going back and forth. That's not the purpose of all of this. The purpose is to maintain position in here in a way that I can manipulate my opponent, that I can move my opponent. One thing's really crucial in wrestling, and that is it doesn't matter how much I'm moving, say if I'm not making contact with Colby here. This is inconsequential because if he's good, he's just going to stay in position. If I've not done something to manipulate him out of position, and he's a smart and an experienced wrestler, he's not going to move. When I have this type of contact with him at this range, the whole purpose is we're trying to move each other. And when I try to move Colby, I'm going to be digging in, and I'm going to be pushing. I can pull to the side. Okay, I'm pushing in to help him retreat. He might be pushing back into me. Okay, we set things up. We're moving each other around. Okay, the whole point, and I'll go over this in a little bit more in terms of examples I'll give an example of pummeling for a couple minutes and kind of transitioning from holds and grips, moving Colby around some. But my purpose here is to get across the point. Your whole goal is to be able to move your opponent. So you think of going forward or backward, circling left, circling right, and that's crucial. So that is really important when you're doing these drills, for example, to be able to push each other back and forth and not just get stuck staying still, or just getting the notion of pushing forward and retreating backwards. You're trying to move your opponent around. Trying to move our opponent around. That's the whole point here.